What would you do if you woke up at 57 and realized you'd been living someone else's life? That the person you thought you were was just a costume you'd been wearing for decades? When Diana looked at me across those buckets of autumn flowers, something inside me cracked open, and I had to choose. Keep living the comfortable lie, or risk everything for a truth I'd spent a lifetime running from. At 57 years old, I thought I knew exactly who I was. Margaret Thornton, retired English professor, widow of 5 years, grandmother of 3 beautiful grandchildren. My life was mapped out in comfortable routines: morning tea with the newspaper, afternoon walks through the park, quiet evenings with a book and a glass of wine. I had made peace with my existence, or so I believed. But peace, I've learned, is sometimes just another word for sleep. It was a crisp October morning when everything changed. The kind of morning where the air smells like apples and wood smoke, where the light slants golden through the trees, painting everything with an amber glow. I had my canvas shopping bag over my shoulder, my sensible shoes on my feet, and absolutely no idea that my carefully constructed world was about to crack wide open. The farmer's market had become my Saturday ritual since Robert's death. I knew every vendor by name, every seasonal rhythm by heart. Mrs. Chen, with her organic vegetables, always slipping an extra bunch of cilantro into my bag. The bearded young man who sold sourdough bread and called everyone friend. The elderly couple with their jams and preserves, married for 60 years and still holding hands. I thought I knew everything about that market, but the flower stall was new, and so was its owner. I saw her before she saw me. She was arranging buckets of autumn blooms, chrysanthemums in rust and gold, late-season roses, dahlias in shades of burgundy and cream. Her hands moved with practiced grace, trimming stems, adjusting arrangements. She wore jeans and a simple green sweater, her silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. And then she looked up. Our eyes met, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not a heart attack, I'm a widow. I know what chest pain feels like. This was different. This was like a door I didn't know existed suddenly swinging open, letting light flood into rooms I'd never explored. She smiled, confident, knowing, dangerous, and I felt the ground shift beneath my sensible shoes. "First time here?" she asked, her voice low and warm like honey. I cleared my throat, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. "First time at your stall?" I managed, surprised by the steadiness of my voice despite my racing pulse. "I usually buy from Mrs. Chen." "Ah," she retired. "Sold me the business." The woman wiped her hands on her jeans and extended one to me. "Diana Walsh, former landscape architect, current flower enthusiast." I shook her hand, and that's when it happened. An electric current passed between us, so real I almost gasped. Her hand was warm, strong, slightly rough with soil and work. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, and they were looking at me like they could see things I'd spent a lifetime hiding. "Margaret Thornton," I said, withdrawing my hand too quickly. "Former professor? Current? I'm not quite sure, actually." Diana's laugh was warm and unguarded, the kind of laugh that made you want to hear it again. "Aren't we all figuring that out?" She gestured to the buckets of flowers. "What speaks to you today, Margaret?" I should have just pointed to the nearest arrangement and fled. That would have been the sensible thing to do. But instead, I found myself surveying the blooms, acutely aware of Diana watching me. I could feel her gaze on my face like a physical touch, and it made my skin warm, made my breath catch. I kept trying to focus on the flowers, but my attention kept drifting back to her. The laugh lines around her eyes, the fullness of her lips, the casual grace of her movements as she adjusted a bucket, her forearms tan and strong beneath her rolled-up sleeves. These observations felt different from how I'd noticed beautiful women before. More urgent, more personal, more. I didn't have words for what it was. "The dahlias," I finally said, pointing to deep burgundy blooms that reminded me of wine in candlelight. "These ones. Excellent choice." Diana selected the best stems with careful attention, Dahlias represent inner strength and dignity. She began wrapping them in brown paper, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. They also represent standing in your power, embracing change. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, and I felt that spark again, stronger this time. I clutched the flowers and my bag, suddenly desperate to escape. "Thank you," I stammered, already backing away. "How much do I— $10. I fumbled for my wallet, thrust a bill at her, and hurried away without waiting for change. My heart was hammering like a schoolgirl's, and I felt ridiculous. 57 years old, and fleeing from a flower vendor like some Victorian maiden. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. That night, arranging the dahlias in a crystal vase, one of the few nice things Robert and I had received as a wedding gift, I couldn't stop thinking about Diana's smile, her hands, the way she'd looked at me like she could see straight through 40 years of carefully constructed walls. I poured a glass of wine and sat in Robert's old chair, the leather cracked and worn from decades of use. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I stared at the dahlias, their deep red petals almost black in the lamplight. "I think I might be attracted to a woman," I whispered to the empty room. The words hung in the air like a confession, like a revelation, like the truth I'd been avoiding my entire life. I waited for shame to come, for horror, for denial. But what came instead was something unexpected. Relief. As if saying it out loud had released some pressure I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. I thought about Robert. Dear, kind Robert with his crossword puzzles and his terrible jokes. I had loved him. I truly had. But sitting there in his chair, I could finally admit what I'd never let myself think before. I had loved him the way you love a dear friend. Deeply. Truly. But not with desire. I had thought that was normal. That passion was for young people, for romance novels, for other people. That companionship was enough, but Diana's smile had awakened something in me, and now I couldn't put it back to sleep. I told myself I wouldn't go back to the farmer's market the next Saturday. I went anyway. Diana was there, arranging fresh flowers in the early morning light. She looked up as I approached, and that smile spread across her face again, the one that suggested she wasn't fooled by my pretense of casual shopping. "Back for more dahlias, Professor? Margaret, please." And yes, they were lovely. Just lovely? Diana's eyes sparkled with amusement. I was hoping for life-changing, or at least moderately transformative. I felt my lips twitch despite my nervousness. They were very aesthetically pleasing. "Ah, Professor speak. I'll take it." She began selecting stems. "Though I think today you need something different. These?" She held up white roses with the faintest blush of pink at their edges. "For new beginnings." Our eyes met, and I saw something there, understanding, patience, invitation. "Diana," I said softly, "why do I feel like you're not just talking about flowers?" She stepped closer, and I could smell earth and lavender and something uniquely her. "Maybe because I'm not," she said gently. "Maybe because I recognize something in you that I spent 30 years trying to hide in myself." My breath caught. I'm not sure what you mean." "Yes, you are." Diana's voice was kind, not pushing, just honest. "But that's okay. These things take time. I'm not going anywhere, Margaret." I took the roses with trembling hands and left. But this time I didn't run. Over the next month, Saturdays became sacred. I arrived earlier each week, lingering longer at Diana's stall. We talked about everything gardening and literature, our late spouses and our children, our fears about aging and irrelevance. Diana told me about her work as a landscape architect, the gardens she'd designed, the joy she found in making things grow, and slowly, carefully, we began talking about deeper things. "Did you love him?" Diana asked one morning, her directness catching me off guard. "Robert." I paused, wrestling with honesty. "Yes, of course." Then, softer. "But I realized now that I loved him the way you love a dear friend. Deeply, truly." but not with desire. Not with passion, Diana finished softly. No. I felt tears prick my eyes. I thought that was normal, that I was just above such things, more intellectual. Diana reached across the table of flowers and took my hand. Her touch sent electricity through me, and I didn't pull away this time. Margaret, she said gently, I spent 30 years married to Thomas. Good man, wonderful father. But I never felt truly alive until after he died, when I finally admitted what I'd been denying since college. My heart was thundering. That, you're a lesbian. Yes. Diana's grip tightened on my hand. I had a relationship with my roommate freshman year. It terrified me so much I ran straight into heterosexuality and stayed there for decades. I stared at our joined hands. Diana's tanned and strong, mine pale and trembling. I swallowed hard. I mean, I've noticed women, admired them. But I always assumed everyone felt that way. Diana laughed gently, and the sound was like coming home. Straight women don't lie awake at night thinking about their friends the way we did, sweetheart. The endearment sent shivers through me. I'm terrified, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Good, Diana said, her thumb stroking circles on the back of my hand. That means it matters. Margaret, would you like to have coffee with me? Not here. Somewhere we can really talk. I looked up at her, at this woman who had walked into my life selling flowers, and somehow shown me I'd been living in the dark. At 57 years old, I was being offered a chance to finally see myself clearly. I took a shaky breath and nodded. At 57, I was finally ready to stop running. Our first coffee date lasted 4 hours. We sat in a corner booth at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. I'd chosen a table in the back, away from the windows, and I hated myself a little for that cowardice. But Diana didn't comment. She just settled across from me, ordered a cappuccino, and waited. The afternoon light filtered through the cafe windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air between us. I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, grateful for something to hold on to. I don't know where to start, I admitted. Start anywhere, Diana said. We have time. So I did. I told her about my marriage to Robert, how we'd met in graduate school, both studying literature, both ambitious and serious. How we'd built a life together that looked perfect from the outside. The house in a good neighborhood, the careers, the daughter, the dinner parties with colleagues. But there was always something missing, I said, staring into my coffee. I thought it was just me. That I was broken somehow, that I didn't have the capacity for passion that other people seemed to have. Diana listened without interrupting, her honey-colored eyes never leaving my face. I had friends, I continued, women friends, and sometimes those friendships felt so intense, so consuming. I remember Jennifer in college. We were inseparable. I used to count the hours until I'd see her again. I'd memorize everything she said, write her long letters even though we saw each other every day. When she got engaged senior year, I cried for a week. I told myself I was just going to miss her, but it felt like heartbreak. Diana finished softly. Yes. The admission felt like exhaling after holding my breath for decades. And there were others over the years. Catherine, who I met at a faculty retreat, we'd stay up all night talking, and I'd feel so alive around her, so seen. When she moved away, I was devastated for months. Robert thought I was depressed and wanted me to see a therapist. Did you? No. I told myself I was fine, that I just valued deep friendship, that not everyone needed physical passion to be happy. I looked up at Diana. I convinced myself I was just more evolved, above such base concerns. Diana reached across the table and took my hand. You weren't broken, Margaret. You were just looking in the wrong direction. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I wasted so much time. Robert deserved someone who could love him the way he loved me. And I deserved I couldn't finish. You deserved to be yourself, Diana said firmly. And it's not wasted time. It's your life, your journey. You weren't ready then. You're ready now. Am I? My voice cracked. Diana, I'm 57 years old. I have a daughter, grandchildren. What am I supposed to tell them? Sorry. I've been living a lie for 6 decades. You haven't been living a lie. You've been surviving. There's a difference. Diana squeezed my hand. Margaret, do you know why I recognized you that day at the market? I shook my head. Because I saw myself 10 years ago. That same look in your eyes, lost and found at the same time. Like you'd just woken up from a long sleep and weren't sure if the world around you was real. She paused. I was 60 when I finally came out. 60. My kids were grown, Thomas had just died, and I was standing at his funeral thinking, I've wasted my entire life. How did you... I struggled for words. How did you move past that? I didn't. Not at first. Diana's voice was gentle but honest. I was angry for a long time. Angry at society, at the church I grew up in, at every movie and book and song that told me there was only one way to be a woman. Angry at myself for not being braver. What changed? I met someone. Diana's smile was sad and sweet. Susan. We'd actually known each other in college. She was the roommate I told you about. We reconnected at our reunion. Both newly widowed, both finally free to be honest. We had 3 beautiful years together before she got sick. Oh, Diana, I'm so sorry. Don't be. Those 3 years were worth all the decades before. She taught me that it's never too late, Margaret. Never too late to bloom into who you're meant to be. Diana's eyes glistened with unshed tears. That's why I know you're not too late either. You're right on time. We talked until the cafe staff started stacking chairs around us, oblivious to the world beyond our corner booth. Diana told me about Susan, about the joy and terror of finally living authentically, about coming out to her children, her son who'd taken it in stride, her daughter who'd needed more time but eventually came around. I told her about Sarah, my daughter, and my fears about disappointing her. About the grandchildren I adored and the terror that I might lose them. About the colleague who'd whispered cruel things when another professor had come out, and how I'd said nothing, done nothing, been complicit in that cruelty through my silence. You can't change the past, Diana said as we finally stood to leave. But you can honor it by living honestly now. Outside the cafe, the October evening had turned cool. Diana walked me to my car, and we stood in the golden glow of the streetlight, neither of us wanting the day to end. Thank you, I said, for listening, for understanding. Margaret, Diana said softly, I'd very much like to kiss you, if that would be all right. My heart stopped, then started again, beating so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I couldn't speak, could only nod. Diana stepped closer, her hand coming up to cup my cheek. Her thumb traced my cheekbone, and I felt tears leak from the corners of my eyes. You're shaking, she whispered. I'm terrified. We can stop. No. I grabbed her wrist, holding her hand against my face. Please, don't stop. Diana smiled that beautiful, knowing smile and leaned in. Her lips were soft, questioning, patient. The kiss was nothing like Robert's had been perfunctory, obligatory, a duty performed. This was electric, awakening every nerve ending I possessed. I gasped against Diana's mouth and felt her smile. Okay? She murmured. More than okay, I breathed. Again, please. We kissed until my legs trembled, until Diana pressed me gently against my car for support, until both of us were breathless and laughing with the joy of discovery. I'm 57 years old, I said wonderingly, and I just had my first real kiss. Diana cradled my face in both hands, her eyes shining in the streetlight. Then we have a lot of lost time to make up for, don't we? Over the following weeks, we built something I'd never experienced before. There was passion, dizzying, intoxicating passion that left me stunned by my own capacity for desire. Diana would kiss me, and I'd feel my entire body come alive, every cell singing with want. We'd sit on her couch, talking and kissing for hours like teenagers, and I'd think, this is what I've been missing. This is what everyone else knew. But it was so much more than physical. There was friendship, laughter, intellectual companionship. Diana could discuss Victorian literature with the same enthusiasm she brought to discussing soil pH levels. We'd argue about poetry and politics, cook dinner together in her sunny kitchen, work side by side in her greenhouse, while she taught me the names of plants I'd never noticed before. And there was recognition, a profound sense of coming home to myself. I feel like I've been asleep my whole life, I told her one evening. We were in her living room, a fire crackling in the fireplace, my head resting on her shoulder. And you woke me up. No, sweetheart, Diana said, her fingers stroking through my hair. You woke yourself up. I just happened to be there when you opened your eyes. But it wasn't all easy. Some nights I'd lie awake, guilt gnawing at my insides. I'd think about Robert, about the wedding vows I'd made in good faith but couldn't fully honor, about the years he'd spent loving someone who couldn't love him back the way he deserved. He knew, Diana said when I confessed these thoughts. Maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep down, he knew. And he chose to stay anyway because what you had together was still valuable, still real. How can you be so sure? Because Thomas knew. Diana's voice was soft with old pain. Near the end, when the cancer had taken so much from him, he told me he'd always known I was different, that I'd never looked at him the way his friends' wives looked at their husbands. But he said he'd loved me anyway, loved what we'd built together. She paused. He told me he hoped I'd find what I was looking for after he was gone. Did that make it easier? No. It made it sadder, but also freeing. Like he'd given me permission to be myself. Diana turned to look at me. Margaret, you can honor Robert's memory and still live your truth. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. 6 months into our relationship, I knew I had to tell Sarah. My daughter had noticed the change in me. How could she not? I was lighter, happier, more alive than I'd been in years. Maybe ever. Mom, you seem different lately, Sarah had said over lunch at our usual spot. Happy. Are you seeing someone? I deflected then, changing the subject to her kids, her job, anything to avoid the conversation I wasn't ready for. But I couldn't keep hiding. Not when Diana had become the center of my world. Not when I was finally, gloriously alive. The day I decided to tell her, I stood in Diana's greenhouse, surrounded by seedlings and spring flowers, trying to find words that wouldn't come. My hands shook as I pretended to prune a fern, mangling the poor plant with my nervous attention. You're worrying again, Diana said from the doorway, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. I can tell by the way you're murdering that poor fern. I set down the pruning shears and accepted the tea, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. I'm telling Sarah tomorrow. About us. Diana set down her mug and pulled me into her arms. I buried my face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of lavender and earth that had become home to me. How do you feel about that? She asked. Terrified, relieved, angry that I have to come out at almost 60. I pulled back to look at her. What if she's disgusted? What if she thinks I've dishonored Robert's memory? What if she doesn't want me around the grandkids anymore? Then we'll handle it together, Diana said firmly. But Margaret, you haven't dishonored anything. You've finally honored yourself. And Sarah loves you. She might be surprised, might need time to adjust, but she loves you. You can't know that. No, but I believe it. And I believe in you. Diana cupped my face in her hands. You're the bravest person I know. You've spent 6 decades living for everyone else. It's time to live for yourself. I invited Sarah to lunch the next day at a quiet bistro near her office. She arrived looking concerned, clearly expecting bad news. I'm not dying, I said quickly, before she could spiral into worst-case scenarios. Actually, quite the opposite. Sarah, I've met someone who makes me happier than I've ever been. Sarah's face brightened immediately. Mom, that's wonderful. What's his name? How did you meet? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I took a steadying breath, my hands clenched around my napkin under the table. Her name is Diana. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched Sarah's expression cycle through confusion, shock, disbelief, and something I couldn't quite read. Her? Sarah finally said. Yes. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Her name is Diana Walsh. She runs the flower stall at the farmer's market. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. Mom, I don't. Sarah shook her head. You're gay? Since when? Since always, I think. I just didn't know it. Or couldn't let myself know it. The words came easier now, like a dam breaking. Sarah, I loved your father. I truly did. But I realize now that I loved him as a dear friend, not as a partner in the way he deserved, in the way I deserved. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers fidgeting with her fork. I braced myself for rejection, for anger, for disappointment. Are you happy? She finally asked, her voice small, deliriously. Does she treat you well? Better than I ever imagined possible. Sarah looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. She reached across the table and took my hand. Then I'm happy for you. I mean, it's a lot to process. But Mom, I always wondered if you and Dad, well, you seemed more like best friends than lovers. I used to worry you were lonely. My own tears spilled over. I was, for so long, but not anymore. I'd like to meet her, Sarah said. Diana? I'd like to meet the woman who makes my mother glow like this. That evening, Diana, Sarah, and I shared dinner in Diana's garden. I'd been a nervous wreck all afternoon, changing clothes 3 times, arriving at Diana's house early to help her prepare even though she'd told me everything was under control. Stop fussing, Diana had said, catching my hands as I rearranged the outdoor table for the 3rd time. She's going to love me, or at least tolerate me for your sake. Either way, we'll be fine. But when Sarah arrived, something magical happened. Diana greeted her with warmth but not excessive friendliness, giving Sarah space to be comfortable. She asked thoughtful questions about Sarah's work as a pediatric nurse, her kids, her interests. She shared funny stories about my terrible gardening skills that made Sarah laugh until she cried. Mom tried to plant tomatoes in February, Diana said, her eyes twinkling. In the ground. She was genuinely confused when I told her they'd freeze. That sounds like Mom, Sarah said, grinning at me. She once tried to keep a cactus alive and somehow overwatered it. I was being attentive, I protested. But I was laughing, too, my heart full of relief and joy. By dessert, a lemon tart Diana had made from lemons grown in her own greenhouse. Sarah was calling Diana by her first name and discussing landscaping ideas for her backyard. As we cleared the dishes, Sarah pulled me aside in the kitchen. Mom, she said softly, I'm really happy for you. Diana's wonderful. And you're glowing. I haven't seen you this alive in maybe ever. Really? Really. Sarah hugged me tight. I love you. And I'm proud of you for being brave enough to live your truth. I held my daughter and wept, releasing years of fear and shame. After Sarah left, I found Diana waiting on the porch steps, backlit by fairy lights strung through the climbing vines. The evening was cool and clear, stars just beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Come here, Diana said, opening her arms. I settled against her, feeling her warmth seep into me, breathing in the scent of jasmine that grew wild along her fence. Thank you, I murmured. For what? For having the courage to sell flowers at a farmer's market? I laughed softly. For seeing me. For waiting while I found myself. For being patient with me when I was so lost. Diana kissed the top of my head, her arms tightening around me. Margaret Thornton, you were worth waiting a lifetime for. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. I thought about the year behind me, how I'd gone from a half-asleep widow going through motions to a woman fully alive, fully herself. How Diana had walked into my life with her knowing smile and her patient hands and shown me that it's never too late to bloom. "What are you thinking?" Diana asked. "That I'm 58 years old, and my life is just beginning." "Good thoughts?" "The best thoughts." I turned in her arms to face her. "Diana, I love you. I don't know if it's too soon to say that, or if there are rules about these things, but I love you. You've given me myself, and that's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Diana's eyes shimmered with tears in the fairy light. "I love you too, Margaret. From that first moment at the farmer's market, when you looked at me like you were seeing the sun for the first time. I knew then that you were someone special, someone worth waiting for." She kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and I kissed her back, no longer afraid, no longer hiding, just Margaret, finally whole, finally home. Spring turned to summer, and our life together bloomed like Diana's gardens. I spent more and more time at her house, until one day I realized I was only going back to my own house to collect mail and water the plants. The house I'd shared with Robert felt like a museum now, full of memories but no longer alive. "Move in with me," Diana said one morning, as we had coffee on her porch, watching hummingbirds dart between the flowers. "Diana, I know it's fast. I know people will talk. But Margaret, I'm 67 years old, and I don't want to waste another day. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to cook dinner with you every evening. I want to build a life together, whatever time we have left." I thought about my empty house, about the life I'd been clinging to out of habit rather than love. Then I thought about this Diana's hand in mine, hummingbirds in the morning light, a future full of possibility. "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'll move in with you." We sold my house that fall. Sarah helped me sort through decades of accumulated life, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to leave behind. It was bittersweet, packing away pieces of my past, but also freeing, like shedding a skin that no longer fit. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Sarah asked, as we wrapped Robert's collection of first edition Dickens novels. "It's okay to take your time." "I'm sure." I paused, holding a copy of Great Expectations that Robert had loved. "Your father would want me to be happy." "And I am happy, Sarah. For the first time in my life, I'm completely, authentically happy." Sarah hugged me tight. "Then that's all that matters." My first morning, waking up in Diana's house, our house now, I lay in bed and watched the sunrise paint the walls gold and pink. Diana was still asleep beside me, her silver auburn hair spread across the pillow, her face peaceful in the early light. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, safe, comfortable, half asleep. I thought about how terrified I'd been that October morning at the farmer's market, how I'd almost run from the best thing that had ever happened to me. Some hearts take longer to bloom, I realized. They spend years in darkness, waiting for the right conditions, the right light, the right nourishment, the right moment of courage. Diana stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw me watching her, she smiled that beautiful, knowing smile that had changed everything. "Good morning, love," she murmured, reaching for me. "Good morning," I whispered back, settling into her arms. The first morning of the rest of our lives. And as the sun rose higher, flooding our room with light, I finally understood what it meant to be truly, completely, gloriously alive. At 58, I had finally bloomed into my truest self, finally discovered the love I was always meant to have, and it was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. That was 3 years ago. I'm 60 now, and every morning still feels like that first sunrise, full of light, full of possibility, full of Diana. Telling you my story wasn't easy. For so long, I was ashamed of how late I came to understand myself. But Diana taught me that there's no shame in blooming on your own timeline. If my story helped you feel less alone, or gave you the courage to be honest about who you are, then every moment of fear was worth it. Please, share this with someone who's still hiding, someone who thinks they're too old, too settled, too far gone to change. Tell them Margaret's story. Tell them it's never too late to come home to yourself. Thank you for witnessing my truth.